What's up everyone, how are we doing? RazmaGaming here back with another TFT video. This time we're going over the patch 11.10 changes, all the big changes that are happening and everything that you should expect. It's a big patch, so let's get right into it. So we're starting with traits, we're just going over the patch notes. And in the traits, the first changes are to Abomination. Abomination is getting a buff pretty much across the board. 3 Abominations not getting touched, but 4 and 5 respectively are both getting HP buffs, HP scaling like star bonus buffs per champion, and attack damage buffs. All of that together means A-Bomb, it's actually probably going to be worth trying like a 4 A-Bomb comp, or if you get the spat, maybe a 5 A-Bomb comp. That could shake up the meta a little bit with that, so we'll see. Going over to Cavalier, Cavaliers are getting a 3 and 4 buff, so their damage reduction is going up 5% at each level respectively. Cavalier 2 is not being touched. I see this being used in like a possibility of a spat, you know, a Cavalier spat Mord with 80% damage reduction sounds a little scary. So that's how I see that being used. I really don't think if you're having to run 4 Cavaliers and you don't have a spat, I still don't think that'll be that good, because the Cavalier units themselves, you know, Kled, Sejuani, Hecarim, aren't that good. Rel's pretty good, but the rest of them really aren't. Moving over to Dragon Slayer. Dragon Slayer is getting a buff at 4 units, not getting touched at 2. So at 4 units, the Dragon Slayer unit, so the unit that is actually the Dragon Slayer, is getting a 10 extra AP, and the non-Dragon Slayer ability power is going up another 10 AP as well. So for Dragon Slayer, getting a little stronger, might see it used more with Mordekaiser, or using it to buff another carry with a lot of AP. Again, I see this as being a very good spat trait. You know, throw this AP spat on, throw the Dragon Slayer spat on like a Vel'Koz, on a Karma, somehow to make that work. Could be pretty good. Forgotten 6 and 8 are getting changes. 6 is actually getting a 10 AD and AP nerf, which I think it's pretty, like, it's not that high, but over 6 champions, that's 60 AD and 60 AP. So overall, that does make a pretty substantial difference. As well as with the shadow items, the way Forgotten scales with shadow items is now actually going to be a little lower because it's percentage based. So that's a pretty big hit. The Forgotten 9 bonus is getting bigger, but Forgotten 9 is such a chase trait, I don't think it matters that much. Overall, I like the Vayne comp is dead. We'll get to those changes pretty soon. The Vayne comp's pretty much dead. The only other real Forgotten comp there is right now is possibly Katarina carry or Draven carry. And really, I feel like 3 Forgotten will probably be the best for those. 6 Forgotten probably won't be played that much, but we'll see. Knights are getting a buff at 6 Knights. They're going from 75 damage reduction to 90. It's a pretty substantial change, but because you have to run a Leona and a Poppy plus the other 4, you know, good Knights, it's like a toss-up to I think if it's actually really gonna be playable or not. If you're fighting sources of like constant damage, you know, really fast attacking but not very hard hitting, I think it would be very viable. It's actually really good against Vel'Koz because Vel'Koz's damage is consistent hits. It's not actually all one hit. So it's very good against something like Vel'Koz, but I don't know, putting 6 Knights on board is a very, very hard thing to, you know, do. Then you only have 2 more slots at level 8 or 3 more slots at level 9. Possibly like a 6 Knight Kale comp might be viable, but we'll see. Mystic is getting a 20 MR buff at 4 Mystic. Just an overall buff to Mystic. If a lot of Vel'Koz, a lot of Karma, a lot of Heimerdinger in your lobby, 4 Mystic is definitely going to be viable. And Verdant is getting a 1-second buff at 2 Verdant and a 2-second buff at 3 Verdant. This is actually a pretty substantial change because a lot of CC happens at roughly the 5-second mark in a fight, and Verdant ending at 4 seconds with only 2 Verdant versus staying till 5 seconds. You know, that could be the difference between your carry getting thresh hooked, Zyra ult hitting your carry, hitting your entire team, all of that, versus, you know, with the 5 seconds not being affected by it. So that could be a pretty big change. Overall, I think Verdant is pretty hard to run unless you're running Kale. Anyway, unless you're running Kale or Ashe as your carry, you're not really going to be running Verdant anyway. So tier 1, so 1 cost champions here. We're now moving over to. Aatrox is getting a damage buff across the board. He's getting better AD scaling on his ult. His 1-star ult is now going to be better than his 2-star is currently. And his 2-star ult's getting to what 3-star is currently on patch. So if you play 2-star Aatrox, he might be able to hold some AD items pretty decently now. Get 3 Redeem, 2 Legionnaire, throw a couple AD items on him. Well, now he's holding some, possibly Draven or Aphelios items for late game for you. I think that could be pretty decent. The 3-star buff going all the way up to 360% AD. Maybe we see a 3-star Aatrox build. 3-star Aatrox, reroll redeemed or something. We'll see. Another 1-cost redeemed unit is getting a change, Leona. So Leona's gaining 30 more AD, which is quite a lot of AD. But her tankiness is getting hit pretty hard. She's getting a damage reduction nerf at 2, 3, and at 1, 2, and 3-star on her ult. It's going down 10 base at 1-star, 20 base at 2-star, and 150 at 3-star. So the really fun, 3-star Leona build is probably going to be dead if you ever played that one. Otherwise, I think they're hitting Leona's tank a little bit too much, giving her a lot of AD to compensate. I'm going to have to just play around with this a little bit. I was really big on a Leona 2-star with a Redemption as an early tank. I'll have to see how that feels again before I can really make a big judgment. Lisandra is the next 1 cost, and she's getting nerfs across the board. 1, 2, and 3-star Lisandra, all nerfed. Primary damage and secondary damage, all nerfed. 3-star Lisandra is going down to 2-star Lisandra's power. 3-star Lisandra is going down to current 2-star Lisandra's power level. The ult was going from 500 to 400 damage, and the secondary damage is going from 250 to 200. Lisandra reroll, unless you super high roll it, is probably going to be pretty dead at this point. I don't think that scaling is going to be that good anymore. We'll have to wait and see. I don't see that build being that good. Vayne is getting an AD buff, but it's to compensate because her silver bolts damage is being completely nerfed. She's level 2-star Vayne will be doing the same silver bolts damage as 1-star Vayne. It's going down 30 at 2-star and 20 at 3-star. So it's a sizable nerfs on Vayne. Overall, the Vayne comp was too oppressive. Vayne needed changes. I get it. She's a 1-cost unit. I hope this doesn't completely gut her. 2-star Vayne with a Hurricane early game can still be a carry. But I'm not that hopeful about it. Not with these changes. Udyr is getting a pretty sizable buff for his Tiger Stance, which is more damage. Maybe you could use him as a slight item holder, a better item holder for you. If you're playing skirmishers, him holding items for Jax might be viable. Overall, don't think it's too big of a change. His 3-star is getting buffed decently, so if you're playing Draconic, you hit a 3-star Udyr, maybe he can run some items. And last 1 cost is Warwick is getting a 3-star buff, 50 more base damage on his ult. Nothing too crazy. Don't see it's going to be that big, but it's there. Alright, so in 2-cost champions, Brand 1 is getting 100 damage nerf, Brand 2 isn't getting touch, and Brand 3 is getting 100 damage buff. Overall, I'm perfectly, I think these changes don't change that much. Brand 1 just isn't going to be doing as much damage as he currently does. Brand 2 stays the same, and Brand 3 is a little stronger. Maybe reroll Brand becomes a thing. I don't think it's going to change it too much. With the A-bomb buffs as well, I do see it being a little viable, though. Hecarim just getting a 40 starting mana buff. So he'll be tankier, he'll guarantee an ult every time. This plus the Cavalier buff, maybe he can actually be a pretty decent tank now. Leblanc 3 is getting a half-second nerf on her stun. The damage isn't being touched. I think it's perfectly fine. I think really LeBlanc's still going to be playable. I think it's just going to... Those ending fights where, you know, she has a dark blue buff and she perma-stuns the enemy isn't going to happen as much. But I still think it's still good. This is more of a bug fix, but allies would no longer chase targets that Syndra is tossing. That is a huge fix for anybody who plays, like, Redeemed with Syndra Vel'Koz, or, like, just throws a Syndra on for Invoker. Your units won't run out of the corner halfway across the map anymore. That's huge. Set is getting a 20% AD scaling nerf on his ult. This is just because that Set 3-star comp that popped up the past couple days. I don't really think that comp's even that oppressive. I don't know if they really had to nerf this, but we'll see. Trundle getting 2 buffs in attack speed and mana. I think those are probably pretty warranted because Trundle's kind of weak right now, and I think just playing him with 3 skirmishers early game will be pretty good. Victor is getting just a 3-star buffs. 850 is over 750, 425 over 375. 1 and 2 star aren't being touched. If you get for Victor 3, you high roll it, he'll do a little more now. Don't see that changing too much either. So 3 cost buffs are where a lot of the changes are happening. All of these changes are 3 cost. So, start with the Katarina. Katarina gaining a 50 health buff, and Katarina 3 gaining damage buffs. I think Katarina 3 is going to be the way, like, if you play Forgotten, Katarina's going to be your carry now. That's, like, I feel like a Katarina Forgotten or a Katarina 3, like, just 3 Forgotten with other stuff. I feel like that's going to be a pretty viable play. I think, you know, giving her extra health, Katarina's biggest problem is she just dies too fast. She does a lot of damage, and 50 extra HP will go a long way on her. So, watch out for Katarina right now. If you high roll like a Katarina too early, think about, you know, maybe trying for that 3-star. Lee Sin getting 50 health buff, which is actually even better than that sounds for him, because Nightbringer scales with max health, so that also makes the Nightbringer shield bigger on him. So, right there, that's really, very good. And he's getting a 50 damage buff at 1 and 2 star on his ability, and 3 stars getting a 100 damage buff. I think 3-star Lee Sin is going to be a monster at 750 AoE damage per ult, but getting there would still be hard. I think this has some warrant with, I'm just going to scroll down to it for a second, with the Yasuo buffs as well. Yasuo 3-star getting a buff as well. I see a Yasuo and Lee Sin reroll build coming out. I see 3-star Yas, 3-star Lee Sin, you know, 4 to 6 Nightbringer. I see that being a pretty viable build. Yasuo's getting 150 damage buff on his 3-star ult, plus extra on-hit true damage. Lee Sin's getting 100 damage on his ult. You slow roll like level 7 for Yas 3, Lee 3, playing like 4 Nightbringer with another Legionnaire and then just a couple other good units. I see that being a very respectable comp right now. So Lulu is getting a 3-star buff. No other changes. Just Lulu can hit another unit now at 3-star. Just Lulu 3 buff. Don't see it being that big or that small. Lux is now just a bug fix where she will not fail at casting a spell. Very good. Pantheon's getting a lot more AD scaling, going up to 650% at 3-star. 1, 2, and 3 are all being buffed. 3-star Pantheon's probably going to be a monster. Unsure how much else this really changes, because I still don't see giving Pantheon the AD items over other skirmishers or something. Morgana is getting a major nerf. Morgana is going from a 3 hex range to a 2 hex range on her ult. That is a major nerf. I still think she's a good unit for giving great CC onto the enemy front line, but she'll no longer be heading enemy backliners pretty much at all. Unless they're like, all the entirety of their front line is dead. No more having to worry about, you know, if they centered their Morgana, if you center your carry, will the Morgana hit the ult? Hit them with the ult. Honestly, I'm a little on the fence about this. I think Morgana probably was a little too strong. That's a pretty substantial change, though, so we'll see what happens. The only other change is Morgana 1 damage is going up a little bit. 50 AP. 50 damage. So, Nidalee getting 2 buffs, getting a mana buff again, so down to 60 mana, so she goes into Cougar form faster. And 3-star buff is doing the ability, it does more damage now after a crit or a dodge. Nidalee 3 and Skirmishers, you know, might be a play. Dawnbringers even. We'll see. Nocturne Bug Fix. TLDR on this. When he has AD items, he'll be healing for more. So Nocturne Carry can be pretty scary. I think Nocturne Carry will become a thing. Give him a Shadow QSS and let him go to town. Nunu getting a max mana buff. 15 lowered max mana. This, along with the brand and along with A-bomb buffs, I think A-bomb's going to be pretty good. Riven getting buffs across the board. A 50 base health, which is the same as the Lee Sin, meaning she has extra scaling built in with a Dawnbringer. So that's actually equals more health technically. Cast time going way down, and bonus AD going way up. She's going to be pretty scary now. I feel like a Riven with AD items is going to be a really, really good mid-game carry. I don't know how much she's going to work in the late game because of how much repeatable CC hits the front line, and I don't know that. But, you know, a 6 Legionnaire team, Riven, Yasuo, both getting buffs. Both 3 cost Legionnaires could definitely see that being better. We already went over the Yasuo buffs, and Zyra is getting a 3-star buff, 100 extra damage. Zyra 3, if you're playing Draconic, you get 100 extra damage. Good. So, 4 cost champions. Aphelios, his ult can now crit. His ult is getting less base damage, less attack damage scaling, but it can crit. If you build an IE on him, the numbers, I believe, work out that he'll be doing a little more damage with his ult. But if you don't build an IE, his ult will probably be doing less damage. It has a chance to crit, but if it doesn't crit because you're not building crit on him and it doesn't have a high chance to crit, then it'll probably be doing a little bit less damage. I feel like IE will probably be core on Aphelios now. We'll see. Draven, mana buff, so just straight up Draven buff. 50 mana goes down to 40. He'll cast more axes faster. Ivern and Daisy are getting just a pretty decent sized change. TLDR of this one, if you give Ivern AP, it gives Daisy a lot more damage. Might actually be viable to put AP on Ivern and let Daisy be a pretty big carry. We shall see if that actually happens. I'm not gonna say yes or no here. This is one I'd have to play with to test it. Mordekaiser getting a 10 mana nerf. Stop him repeat casting so he can't just constantly be shielded. I think it's still a good nerf. I think Mord is still a little bit too strong. This is probably about the max nerfs Mord needs. He's probably in about the perfect spot now. And Rel getting a half-second cut down on 1 and 2-star Rel on the stun. The shield is not getting nerfed at all, just Rel stunning everybody. So I think Rel was a little too strong anyway, having a huge AoE stun and AoE shield. I think lowering the stun down is perfectly good. So then 5 cost champions. Garen 1 getting a slight nerf on his max health shield on his ability. Heimerdinger taking a mana nerf and a turret AD nerf. Heimer's ability is not getting touched. The ability still does massive amounts of damage. The turret's AD is doing less, and Heimer needs more like mana generation in order to work. If you're playing Renewers with Heimerdinger, the mana change is actually almost nothing because Renewer generates a percentage of max mana, so he'll actually be generating more mana with his Renewer now. It just kind of forces you to play Renewer. You can't just throw Heimer in on any board and be like, hey, that's a really good unit now. The Kindred nerfs are actually on Wolf's damage, which I didn't really think was that oppressive, but apparently they read the numbers and they thought it was. So Wolf is getting nerfs. Kindred's ability, the big, AoE circle where people can't die, is not getting touched. And Teemo 1 is getting a little bit of a buff. He throws one more Infernal Soul every throw. Teemo 1 might be a pretty decent unit now. It doesn't hurt as much to buy it, throw it on board, and you're not killing yourself for nothing. The last changes are to items, and there's quite a few. Both chalices, regular chalice and shadow chalice, are just losing 5 AP. I think that's still good items. They still give a lot of AP to your team. Still think they're perfectly fine. Dark Shroud of Stillness no longer affects the wearer. That means if you build a Dark Shroud, you don't have to always hit anybody on your team. If you position it properly, put the Dark Shroud on a unit, put them away from your entire team, none of your team gets shrouded, and you still give the better shroud to the hit the better shroud on the other enemy team. D-Claw is getting a 50 MR buff, just a straight buff. Eclipse Cape is getting a buff so it doesn't burn your unit as much. I think it's going to be a viable item now. I think the amount of burn damage that thing can do fast is going to be pretty insane. Evil Giant Slayer is getting... So Shadow Giant Slayer is getting a buff. There is no longer a negative damage, a threshold where it does less damage. So if the unit just has less than 1100 health, it doesn't have negative effects for you. It just does nothing extra. So I think it's going to be a pretty good item because late game, a lot of units have over 1100 health. Frozen Darkheart and Frozen Heart are both getting a nerf. Frozen Darkheart is going to the same attack speed reduction that currently Frozen Heart is at, and Frozen Heart's losing 10%. I think the Assassin Frozen Heart combo was a little too oppressive. This definitely helps cut that down. I think this is a good change. Fallen GA, 10% max health nerf. I don't think this was really that needed, personally, but I still think it's not too big of a change. I'd still put Fallen GA on, like, Morgana, on Rel, on Taric, on any good tank. Ionic Darkspark getting pretty big changes. So it's only going to hit your own team for 50% of max mana instead of 100%, which is not much damage. And it'll have 10 AP per cast scaling. I think this on, like, Karma, on a backline unit, on a frontline unit, anyone who wants a lot of AP, I think this thing's going to be absolutely insane now. We'll have to really watch that item. Locket of the Silver Lunari, which is Shadow Locket, just getting 10 more armor and AD. 10 more armor and MR. Pretty good. And the TLDR of the Sacrificial Gauntlet rework, it'll no longer work on a unit such as Vayne, such as Kled, that don't cast. The extra critical strike that comes from it will only work when a unit casts. It works for that unit's cast, so it still works perfectly fine. It just doesn't work on anyone who doesn't cast. If you put it on a unit who doesn't cast, it's just like a regular gauntlet. The Sacrificial Redemption, so the Shadow Redemption, is getting more healing and less current health damage on the unit who's wearing it. I think this is going to be a pretty decent item now for a pretty tanky team. I still normally rather regular Redemption, but I think throwing this on a backline unit who doesn't get touched, giving healing to all your frontline, pretty good. Spectrospheric Surgeon is getting a slight buff, 5% less damage given penalty. I still wouldn't put this on a carry unit, but I'd still use it on any support. Titans is actually getting a major buff. It's going from 2 to 3 AD and AP a stack, which means it can now cap up to 75 instead of 50 armor and AD and AP. I think Titans on a lot of units is going to become pretty damn good. We'll wait to see, though. And then both Servat portals will now work on Abomination again. They will be less effective, so they will have less health, less true damage, all of that good stuff, all their damage. but they will still work. They will spawn the unit. They will taunt. So it is effective again. Shadow Warmog, health loss per second, going down to 60 from 100. Very, very powerful item. Put this on any Dawnbringer, any Nightbringer, any big tank. I'm always going to use this thing now. If the negative just got cut down majorly, I'm always going to use it. And Zeke's Bleak Herald, ally AS reduction, it's getting a buff, so it's going to reduce your allies' attack speed by 5% less than it currently does. This on a very fast, like, attacking unit, someone who you don't want to waste the time with Ginsu to have stacking, will be extremely strong. And I think it's just getting even stronger with that. And with that, that is all of the changes. We are done. There are a couple more bug fixes. The only big ones really is Heimerdinger turret now fires correctly in ghost armies. On live right now, if you fight a ghost where a Heimer's in it, Heimer's turret doesn't shoot. Completely broken. Otherwise, everything looks pretty good. I hope this video helped you guys. If it does, if you have any questions, come see me live on Twitch. I'm live 6 days a week, Monday to Saturday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I hope everyone has a good day. Thank you very much.